Chosen one, they tortured you and triggered God's judgment. The fire they lit is consuming them. They thought burying you would end your story. But Chosen one, what they buried was not a coffin, it was a spark. And that spark became a wildfire. You didn't just survive the flames of hell, you made hell itself tremble. Think on this while they dragged your name through the dirt, mocked your silence, and laughed at your breaking points. Something unseen was happening. Every insult, every betrayal, every counterfeit embrace was nothing but dry wood being stacked around a soul already set ablaze. And now, the very fire they thought would consume you is burning out of control. The smoke they released is choking them, not you. That is the cost of provoking a force they never understood. Because here's the truth few dare to speak. Most of the world's most awakened souls were not escorted into power by peace and comfort. No, they were shattered into it. They were dragged through darkness, stripped by betrayal, left abandoned by the very ones they trusted. That pain was not the end. It was the rewiring. It was the awakening. It unlocked something ancient, something indestructible. And that, Chosen one, is what they accidentally unleashed in you. So remember this, your scars are not shame, they are proof of your becoming. And if this word has found you, don't let it stop with you. Like, share, and subscribe not for numbers, but for souls. Because this is how we protect each other, how we raise the frequency, how we remind the world of a divine law that never fails. No weapon formed against the real ones will ever prosper. Thank you for standing here in this moment. You are not just listening, you are carrying a force that cannot be stopped. And hear me, this is more than encouragement. This is a warning, written in fire. They tortured you and believed there would be no cost. But when hands reach for a soul hand-picked by heaven for higher ground, they set in motion consequences they cannot escape. Call it karma if you wish. Call it justice if you must. It does not matter. Because the universe already has your case on record, and justice has no expiration date. What was done to you was not light. It was not confusion. It was not just drama. They saw your bleeding spirit and chose to cut deeper. They twisted the knife and walked away laughing, thinking the silence would hide it. But the universe never blinks. What they called secret is now under a cosmic spotlight, and that light will not move until truth stands naked for all to see. They tried to bury your name in smoke, hoping you would suffocate. Yet instead you rose, not loud, not frantic, but steady, deliberate, unstoppable. And that, Chosen one, is their greatest fear. Because your response was not rage. It was growth. Your answer was not explanation. It was expansion. And the quiet rhythm of your comeback is what makes it lethal. Do not downplay it. This was not mere emotional warfare. It was spiritual violence. They sought to fracture your mind, drain your faith, strip your energy. They wanted you to doubt your very worth. But in that pressure, they triggered the sacred. They awakened what they can never silence. And here lies the eternal law. When the wrong people push the right soul too far, they do not destroy it, they awaken it. This message is not about their guilt. It is about your recognition. It is to remind you you are seen. The truth is, you were tortured, and no one handed you a guide on how to endure it. You learned to build peace one fragment at a time, while carrying your pain in plain sight, pretending you were unshaken. Yet that same pressure that was meant to crush you has become the forge of your power. Not a power that pleads for justice, but a power that embodies justice simply by existing. They wanted your spirit to collapse, but instead you became their mirror. And now when they look at you, they cannot stand the reflection. Their lies, their envy, their fear, all of it is exposed in the light of your healing. That is why they shift uneasily in your presence. That is why they watch you from a distance but cannot touch you. You have stepped into a realm that they no longer have access to, not because you are greater than them, but because you survived the very level they believed would end you. The fire they lit is not consuming you. It is consuming the falsehoods surrounding you. And those who once celebrated your downfall now whisper your name like a warning. Not out of love, but out of fear. Because when a chosen one rises after torment, the universe does more than protect them, it elevates them. And to those who schemed against you, understand this. You did not simply wound a person. You mishandled a soul that heaven itself was shaping in silence. And now, you are witnessing the aftermath. Don't bother reaching for water because this fire does not burn from the ground, it descends from above. And it will not cease until every lie, every betrayal, every hidden serpent is driven into the open. Chosen one, this is your appointed time. They tried to dim your flame, but in doing so, they set your purpose ablaze. And once a divine fire is lit, no force can extinguish it. Remember this, the very moment they laughed at your pain was the exact moment their judgment began. Because this was never a story of revenge. This is not revenge. This is spiritual correction, and it is already unfolding. So, pause here, chosen one. If you've ever felt the kind of pain that didn't just hurt, but ignited a fire inside you that you can't even explain, mark it in the comments with 777. The number of divine completion. That number is more than digits. It is the seal of the moment the universe flipped the script in your favor. And if this message is already striking something deep, consider sewing back into it. Even the smallest act of support keeps this mission alive for every silenced voice, for every dimmed light, for every soul that still wonders if they matter. Your love keeps the flame moving forward. Now, let's break it down step by step. If you've ever been burned but refused to bow, what comes next will feel less like words and more like confirmation. Number 1, they poked a sleeping volcano, and now they tremble as the lava consumes everything they built. They didn't just wound you, they awakened something that now turns their comfort into smoke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't immaturity. It was war at the level of your soul. And the cruelest part, they enjoyed it. They fed on your pain. They found power in your breaking. They wore your tears like medals and paraded your breakdowns like trophies. They didn't just hurt you, they built entire narratives of your destruction, like playwrights scripting your downfall while applauding behind closed doors. And ask yourself why. Why would anyone do that to a soul that only ever wanted peace? The answer is simple but piercing. Your light irritated the shadows in them. Your presence unsettled their demons. And instead of facing their darkness, they tried to extinguish your fire. Instead of facing their own shadows, they made you their target. Not because you were fragile, but because you were chosen, and that made you dangerous. Picture it, a group standing around a volcano, thinking it's only a harmless mountain. They carve into it, toss garbage into its mouth, even laugh at its stillness. Why? Because it hasn't erupted yet. But silence is not absence, it is containment. And when a volcano erupts, it doesn't give warnings. It levels everything that mocked its quiet. That is you now. That is where we stand. You carried what no one saw. You gave grace where none was deserved. You absorbed betrayal after betrayal, wound after wound, and still chose to lead with your heart. And what was their response? They twisted your kindness into weakness. They mocked your forgiveness as if it were foolishness. They turned your loyalty into leverage. They mistook your silence for surrender. But that silence was never submission, it was gathering. It was heaven's containment of something ancient, something cosmic, waiting for its release. And in striking you, they didn't weaken you. They lit the fuse of their own undoing. Their cruelty was meant to shrink you, but instead it summoned a force they cannot control. And now the universe is balancing the scales. Not with arguments, not with noise, but with consequences that cannot be denied. They feel it, they see it, and yes, they are terrified. Not because you shouted back, but because you walked away. You vanished from their chaos, and now they are left to choke in the very storm they designed. Chosen One, understand this. They didn't just hurt you. They activated you. They didn't just wound you. They triggered your transformation. The fire they lit to burn you has become a wall they cannot pass, a flame they cannot extinguish, a mirror that exposes everything they tried to bury. That is the law of the unseen. When you interfere with a soul still under construction, you awaken a version of them you were never equipped to face. And how they loved to play innocent, didn't they? Pretending their hands were clean, acting shocked when you finally drew a boundary, spinning stories to hide the truth that they fed on your collapse like parasites. But now, the cracks are showing. The very lies they crafted are the lies that are suffocating them. And the energy they poured into destroying you is not simply returning, it is multiplying. Because the universe does not just keep receipts, it writes sequels. They mistook your silence for safety, but silence is never empty. Silence is sacred. Silence is where the universe sharpens its justice. And now that justice is unfolding with precision, not because you demanded it, not because you wished for it, but because truth always outlives deception, and light always pierces the shadows, no matter how thick they appear. This is not about revenge. This is not about gloating. This is about revelation. You're no longer in the chaos. You're watching from a distance now because you've been upgraded. Your soul has been lifted to a level they cannot enter, and that is why they scramble now. That is why they feign ignorance, pretending not to notice you, though deep within, they know. They know what they did, and they know what is coming. Their nights are restless, their silence heavy, as they scroll through your name in secret, haunted by the reality that their reach no longer touches you. You have become the living symbol of everything they tried to destroy, but failed. Proof that their hands, their words, their schemes were never enough. And that truth eats at them quietly, endlessly. So if you still wonder why they attacked, here lies your answer. They could not endure the light inside you. They thought if they struck early enough, they could stop the bloom before it appeared. But they forgot some souls are not cushioned into greatness. Some souls are carved in fire.
And Chosen One, you were being sculpted all along.
They believed the damage they caused would close your story. But that damage became the very ink the universe used to write your beginning anew. You are not the victim of their cruelty. You are the echo that continues to remind them of it. Every step you take now, clothed in silence, carried in strength, lifted in elevation, preaches the same sermon. They lost something they never deserved to hold. So let them sit in it. Let them wrestle with the storm they summoned. This weight is not yours to carry anymore. This is not your story to repair. What they kindled to see you burn has now surrounded them in flames. And when the universe responds, it does not whisper, it does not warn, it consumes. The universe does not respond with empty threats. It responds with outcomes real, undeniable outcomes that leave lessons no one forgets. And as they watch you rise now, radiant and untouchable, the revelation will strike them too late. They didn't just hurt a person. They tortured a soul that was protected the entire time. In wounding you, they provoked the very force they never believed would fight back. And that force does not forget. Now they are about to learn what happens when you feed your demons with the tears of one chosen by fire. So let's keep going, because it only grows more real from here. Number 2, they mistook your silence for weakness. But your silence was never powerless. It was the universe building a case they cannot escape. Each time they struck at you, they were not burying you. They were stacking evidence against themselves. Let's make this clear, Chosen One. They thought your suffering was weakness. They believed your tears were nothing more than noise. They assumed your silence was surrender. But what they never understood, what they could not see, is that your pain was never wasted. It became spiritual evidence. Every sleepless night, every false accusation, every whisper in the shadows, all of it was entered, not into a human ledger, but into a cosmic courtroom where truth never expires. Now picture this. You were standing in the storm-drenched, shivering, barely surviving while those you once loved threw stones at you and mocked it as rain. But behind those clouds, unseen by every eye, a courtroom was forming. Not one with judges in robes, but one where energy never lies and intentions cannot hide. And while you were breaking down in public, the universe was building your case in silence, quietly, patiently, with unshakable precision. Your suffering was never dismissed. Every tear, every wound, every betrayal was archived. Because the universe does not move on impulse or emotion. It moves on truth. And truth does not need to shout, it simply accumulates. They believed that because nothing struck them immediately, they had escaped. They thought karma had dozed off, that silence meant innocence. But silence is not innocence. Silence is strategy. The universe is never reckless. It waits. It watches. It allows people to weave their own rope, strand by strand, until one day they realize too late that they are standing on the edge, a noose fashioned from their own lies around their neck. And here's what they missed. Your silence was never weakness. It was the loudest statement you could make. You weren't silent out of fear. You were silent because the truth was too sacred to waste on deaf ears. Your silence was space for justice to breathe, for judgment to ripen. And now that justice has arrived, it is not quiet. It is thunderous. It is undeniable. It is final. They thought gossip could bury the truth, but truth grows roots. And now, those roots are breaking through concrete, splitting open the very ground they once stood on with pride. Let's answer the question that has been clawing at your chest. Why did it take so long? Why didn't the universe act sooner? Because real justice never rushes. It doesn't come with noise, it comes with timing. If judgment had moved too early, the story could have been twisted. They would have cried fake tears, played the victim, spun the narrative to look innocent. But now, there is nothing left to spin. The lies are exhausted. The masks are slipping. The crowd they manipulated has scattered, and all that remains is the raw truth of what was done. Picture this, a courtroom where the defendant doesn't even know they're on trial. They laugh, they smile, they celebrate hollow victories while behind the scenes, every word, every move, every hidden scheme is being documented as evidence. And then one day, without warning, the verdict is served. No loophole, no exit, no excuse, only undeniable truth presented in full. That is where they stand now. The universe is not asking them questions anymore. It is not giving them time to explain. It is handing them consequences. And the most brutal part, you didn't have to speak. You didn't have to clap back. You didn't have to prove a single thing. Your life became the testimony. Your healing became the record. Your glow is the report. Your evolution is the evidence. They are now haunted by the very thing they swore would never arrive: truth. And truth has a terrifying habit of showing up long after everyone else has moved on. Some people don't believe the fire is real until the smoke is rising from their own front door. They mistook your restraint for weakness. But restraint is not weakness, it is supernatural strength. It takes a chosen soul to remain silent while being torn apart, to resist retaliation when the whole world would have excused it. And that, chosen one, is why the universe placed its hand on you. Not because you are flawless, not because you are greater, but because when tested, you did not fold. You did not feed the fire they did. And now, unable to face their own sparks, They are trying to blame the heat on you. But remember, you gave them time. You gave them chances. You extended grace and offered every opening for them to confess, to heal, to repair what they shattered. And still, they chose ego. They chose pride. They chose to keep pressing the knife. That was not ignorance, it was intention. And now that intention is being weighed, measured, and judged.
So do not be surprised when the fallout comes dressed as chaos, relationships unraveling, finances collapsing, sleepless nights, empty rooms, and the gnawing isolation of a soul exposed.
This is not coincidence. This is consequence. Because energy does not vanish, it transforms. And the very darkness they hurled toward you is circling back like a boomerang tipped in fire. And maybe you ask yourself, but what if they never apologize? And what if they still pretend nothing ever happened? That changes nothing. Because truth does not require their confession to be loud. Truth does not need their permission to exist. Truth only needs time, and their time has expired. Truth doesn't knock politely. It kicks down doors when it's ready to walk through. Your suffering was not wasted. It was not weakness. It became legal proof in a realm their eyes could never see. And now their peace is disturbed not because you cursed them, but precisely because you didn't. Your silence handed the universe full jurisdiction. And once justice begins to move, it doesn't stop for apologies. It doesn't pause for excuses. It only halts for genuine change, and most of them were never built for that kind of humility. So what now, chosen one? You rise. You heal. You walk forward as if the fire never touched you because it didn't. It consumed everything around you except you. And now they watch from the shadows, realizing the silence they mocked has become a roar they cannot mute. You didn't just survive. You became a living conviction. Walking proof that the universe never forgets. And that is why your very presence shakes the ground beneath them. The same energy they once used to try and destroy you has returned, now dismantling them piece by piece. Let them sit in confusion. Let them wonder why everything feels off. Let them feel the tension in the air. Let them scramble for answers in all the wrong places. Because the truth is painfully simple, they touched someone chosen, and the universe does not play games with souls marked for purpose. And hear me, the fire is not finished speaking. Number 3, they touched fire thinking it was clay, and now their hands are melting. They thought they were merely toying with a person, but in reality, they summoned a curse by mishandling a living altar. Let's make this clear. They weren't just striking at you. They were interfering with an assignment that never belonged to them. They looked at you and saw ordinary. They assumed you were someone to use, mock, and manipulate. But what they failed to grasp is that you were never just a body walking this earth. You are a living altar, a soul carrying sacred weight. And when people throw shade at a chosen one, it is not petty drama. It is a spiritual violation, the kind of violation the universe never overlooks. Imagine this: someone storms into a sacred temple, spray painting the walls, laughing, snapping pictures as if it were a harmless game. But what they don't notice are the unseen eyes watching from above. And the silence in that temple is not permission, it is patience. Because once the temple activates, no intruder ever leaves the same. That is what they did to you. They mocked the sacred, mistook silence for absence, and in doing so, set themselves against something far greater than you. They mistook your soul for an open playground, and now the price is due. They trespassed into holy territory with unclean hands, and the very fire they lit to consume you has turned back, crawling into every corner they thought was safe. Their peace is unsettled, their sleep is restless, even their victories feel hollow. Why? Because they treated what was sacred as if it were disposable. But the universe has laws, and one of them is unshakable. You cannot touch what is sacred and walk away smiling. You cannot curse what heaven has already blessed. You only end up cursing yourself in the attempt. They believed they were teaching you a lesson, but every action was the ink of their own judgment. They believed they were putting you in your place, but all they did was build an altar of consequences under their own feet. And you didn't curse them. You didn't clap back. You didn't break character. And that is why the punishment is undeniable, because your restraint became the legal opening for divine justice to intervene. They played with spiritual fire as if it were mere gossip, mere control, mere correction. But now their dreams are turning to warnings. Their relationships are unraveling. Their atmosphere is poisoned by the very energy they weaponized against you. And this time, there is no escape. They cannot pray it away. They cannot apologize it away. Because their offense was never just against you, it was against the purpose resting on your life. So let this echo in the ears of every enemy. Here is your reminder. They didn't just cross a line, they shattered a spiritual law. And now the flames they sparked are writing truth across their lives in smoke. This is not revenge. This is universal correction. And no shallow apology, no staged remorse can extinguish it. Keep watching, Chosen One. What they plotted in secret is unraveling in public, and the unraveling has only begun. Number 4, they weren't just fighting you. They declared war on the one who sent you. You were never the problem. It wasn't about your personality, your past, or your imperfections. It was about your presence. The moment you entered their orbit, their comfort zones cracked. And you didn't have to raise your voice. You didn't have to make a scene. Your authenticity alone exposed their shadows. They felt threatened by your favor, unsettled by your growth, irritated by a light you never apologized for. And instead of evolving, they attacked the very reflection that made them face themselves. They didn't see your wounds. They only saw the reminder of what they forfeited, of what they buried, of what they feared they could never become. That is why their cruelty was so sharp, so deliberate. But here's the truth, Chosen One. They weren't wrestling with you. They were wrestling with what you carry. And when someone dares to fight a soul carrying divine assignment, they are not picking a battle with a person. They are waging war against the very force that ordained that soul. Your calling unsettled them, but their response sealed their consequences. Imagine a thief breaking into a sacred temple, thinking it's just another building. They see gold, they see treasures, and believe they're stealing from men. But what they touch is guarded by something ancient, powerful, and unseen. The moment they cross the threshold, they've already lost, for they stepped into a war they were never built to fight. That is exactly what your enemies did. They thought it was gossip. They thought it was control. But in truth, they declared rebellion against the universe's plan. And the consequences they now face are not from you, they are from the one who sent you. You were never chosen for comfort. You were chosen for confrontation. And not everyone wanted to be near a soul that made them see the reflection they'd been running from. So instead of rising with you, they chose to ruin you. But here is the divine twist. Every curse they hurled became your confirmation. Every attempt to block your path became the clearing of it. Every lie spoken in the dark only built more evidence for your rise. They thought they were burying you, but they were feeding your fire without even knowing. This was never a disagreement. This was insubordination. This was spiritual treason. They thought they could handle you like anyone else. But you were never anyone else. You were not sent by them. You were sent through them, but not for them. And the moment they turned against you, they turned against the mission itself. The consequence is inevitable, undeniable, unstoppable. Because when you rise against a vessel backed by heaven, the war is lost before the sword even leaves your hand. Number 5, they mistook the delay for mercy. But the pause was never forgetfulness. It was the universe constructing a judgment too airtight to escape. Every moment they thought they were safe. Every time they celebrated in silence, the receipts were being gathered. They dug their own grave with clean hands, but dirty hearts, thinking no one was watching. And you, Chosen One, you asked why. Why it went on so long. Why the betrayal was so deep. Why the very hands you once held could turn and crush you without hesitation. You cried in silence, whispering, "Where is justice? Where is protection?" The answer was there all along. It was being built. What felt like silence was not absence, it was strategy. It was precision. It was divine patience. Because the universe never reacts in emotion. It doesn't swing at the first strike. It waits for the final blow. Not because you were unworthy of defense, but because your enemies were busy weaving the very narrative they would be buried under. Every lie they crafted, every whisper in secret circles, every counterfeit apology was being recorded, time-stamped in a spiritual file they thought did not exist. When the universe delays justice, it is never stalling, it is sharpening the blade. Imagine this, a courtroom where the guilty laugh freely, convinced no one is watching, while behind the scenes a file thicker than they could ever imagine is stacking higher each day. That was your life. You weren't just hurting, you were testifying. Every tear you wiped alone, every insult you absorbed in silence, every time you chose dignity over destruction, it was all evidence, meticulously recorded. They thought they were getting away with it, but in truth, they were drafting their own sentencing memo. You didn't lose because you stayed silent. You won because your silence gave the universe room to roar. If judgment had fallen too soon, they would have spun the story, played the victim, cried their way out, and blurred the truth with charm and lies. But not now. Not anymore. The evidence is undeniable. The verdict is sealed. And what is coming down is not symbolic, it is surgical. The fire that has begun will not only scorch their reputation, it will dismantle the very systems they built by stepping on your name. Their money, their peace, their relationships, every false structure is shaking, collapsing under the weight of divine correction. Not because of karma, but because real justice, spiritual justice, has entered the room. You never had to lift a finger. You never had to curse or clap back. Your endurance became the testimony. Your restraint became the verdict. And now, chosen one, mercy, has left the room. Justice is speaking now, and its voice sounds like fire. Number 6, they thought you were just a person. They didn't know you were their exam. Some people never realized the test was human-shaped until they've already failed it. They laughed at you, used you, discarded you as if you were disposable. To them, you were an easy target, a shoulder when convenient, a scapegoat when needed, a safe place to pour their disrespect. But chosen one, you were never the target. You were the test. A walking evaluation of their integrity, their humility, their spiritual maturity. And now the exam is complete. The grade has been given. Failed. Final. Your presence was never random. It was purpose. You carried an atmosphere they couldn't comprehend, a light that triggered the very darkness they worked so hard to hide. And instead of honoring it, they tried to smother it. Instead of rising higher, they tried to drag you lower. That wasn't just a personal attack, it was spiritual exposure. And now the heavens are responding. They mocked the test, and now they're stunned at the result. Picture it, a classroom where the teacher says nothing during the exam. No hints, no corrections, only silence. That was your presence in their life. You weren't sent to force change. You weren't sent to fix them. You were sent to reveal. Your love exposed their selfishness. Your loyalty highlighted their betrayal. Your grace magnified their arrogance. You weren't simply a blessing they overlooked. You were the test they failed. They mocked you, never realizing heaven was not measuring their prayers or their words about faith. It was measuring how they treated you. You were the measure. You were the mirror. And in their fear, their pride, their ego, they shattered it. They assumed that because you didn't strike back, they were justified. That because you didn't respond, you were weak. But silence is often the loudest indictment. And now your silence is echoing in the spirit, louder than any defense ever could. You never begged for justice. You never chased them down. You passed your test quietly, painfully, completely. And that is why the response is not coming through you, but from above. This is not payback. This is judgment. Because when someone mishandles a divine placement, they don't simply reject a person, they reject the one who sent them. And heaven always answers. Not to punish, but to correct. And when a test this great has failed, the makeup exam does not arrive with grace. It arrives with consequence. Number 7, they sparked a flame for you, but it is devouring their own bloodline. They thought they were blocking your path, but what they truly did was ignite fire beneath their own future. Make no mistake, Chosen One, the fire they lit behind your back was never meant to remain there. It was meant to consume you. Their plan was delay. Their aim was detour. Their goal was to humiliate your name just enough to slow your momentum. But here is the cosmic twist, the very pit they dug with your name on it. Their legacy fell in first. Because when you target someone anointed with purpose, the consequences do not fall like rain, they fall like generational wildfire. This was never a harmless smear campaign. It was a spiritual gamble with stakes they could not afford. Every false word, every manipulated perception, every scheme designed to block your rise was not a curse against your now, it was gasoline poured onto their own later. You cannot curse a chosen one without contaminating your own bloodline. Picture this. Someone sets fire to a field, convinced they are burning your crops. But then the wind shifts. Suddenly it is their land, their house, their foundation consumed by the very flames they started. That is what's happening now. They believed they could control the fire, but they lit it with unclean motives. And once a fire is born of corruption, it answers to no one. You were never stuck, you were in preparation. But they entangled themselves in a storm disguised as strategy. And now that storm is ripping through their own structures. Their finances are shaking. Their peace is fractured. Their name is unraveling. Even the blessings intended for their children tremble under the weight of what they unleashed. Not because you wished it, not because you cursed them, but because the universe carries laws that cannot be bent. And violating the sacred always carries collateral damage. They didn't just wound you, they offended the future. And what's unraveling now is not coincidence, it is consequence. Because when you tamper with divine timing, the backlash is never emotional, it is structural. Systems collapse, comforts dissolve, and no level of denial can muffle the sound of correction. You didn't throw a single stone, yet every lie spoken against you has become a boomerang, and it isn't just returning, it's multiplying. This isn't karma. This is cleansing, a holy fire sweeping through every place they polluted with envy, control, and pride. And now the smoke is rising not from your ruin, but from theirs. They thought they burned you, but the flame was never against you. The flame was always meant to expose them. Number 8, they laughed at your tears, not knowing those tears were alarms echoing in realms they will never reach. They mistook your weeping for weakness, but heaven received them as commands. They stood over your breakdowns as if they were trophies, smirking as though the victory was theirs. They watched your silence, your sleepless nights, your trembling prayers, and believed you were finished. But what they never understood is that you weren't collapsing, you were connecting. Your tears were not mere emotion, they were dispatches. Coded messages released into realms they don't believe exist, realms forever sealed to them. Every sob was an alarm. Every cry was a signal. And heaven heard them all. Every silent cry in the night was a report. Every time you clenched your fists and wept into the darkness, it was not begging, it was summoning. While they mocked your pain, blind to its power, your soul was already opening a courtroom session above their heads. You weren't crying for pity. You were crying for justice. And justice never sleeps forever. Picture this. A building burning while the arsonists laugh outside, convinced you are trapped inside weeping. What they cannot see is that the sprinkler system they triggered is not extinguishing flames, it is activating an alarm, summoning a force they cannot comprehend. That is what your tears were doing. Not drowning you, but alerting heaven. They said you were dramatic, too sensitive, doing too much. But the tears they mocked were drafting a case they cannot escape. You thought no one saw you break, but the realm of justice saw it all. It recorded every betrayal, felt the weight of every sleepless night, and now that realm is moving. Not gently, not slowly, not with warnings, but with a wild, divine response. This is not emotional backlash. This is cosmic judgment. And there is no escape. They cannot outthink it. They cannot lie their way through it. They cannot charm their way into innocence, because the tears they dismissed were evidence sacred, pure, righteous. You were never praying for revenge. You were crying from the depths of your spirit, make it right. And now justice has answered, and it does not ask for permission. It is tearing through the very systems they built to protect themselves. That is why everything is unraveling. That is why confusion now reigns where they once boasted of peace. Because the universe never ignores a soul soaked in sorrow, especially not when that soul is chosen. They believed your weeping was weakness, but in truth you were whispering at a frequency they were never meant to hear. Number 9, they were warned. They simply refused to listen. When the universe whispers and you ignore it, the next sound you hear is the crash of everything you built on lies. Let's not soften this. This wasn't ignorance. It wasn't lack of knowledge. They knew. They felt it deep in the pit of their stomach. They heard it in the silence of their mind when the lights went out and the noise died down. They felt the unease when they tried to sleep, tossing and turning as their own actions haunted them. The universe gave warning after warning, delays, disruptions, dreams that rattled their spirit, people who showed up speaking truths they didn't want to hear. But instead of pausing, instead of humbling themselves and facing the mirror, they escalated. And rebellion is not weakness. It is the arrogance of knowing you are wrong and smiling as you do it anyway. Now imagine this picture: someone walking deeper into quicksand while voices cry out, "Stop!" Yet pride convinces them they will never drown. That was them. They mistook your patience for weakness, your silence for permission, your kindness for something to exploit. The more grace they received, the more reckless they became. But grace mocked is grace exhausted, and they slammed into that expiration point. They weren't just testing you. They were testing the balance of the universe itself. They wanted to see how far they could push, how much damage they could cause before consequences arrived. But universal justice is not polite. It does not knock gently. It moves when the scales tip, and they tipped them again and again until there was no return. They had chances, real ones, opportunities to confess, to change, to stop the spiral. But they doubled down. And that is why their collapse is not random. It is earned. Not because you cursed them, not because you longed for revenge, but because justice is not partial. It does not bow to image or reputation. It weighs intention. And theirs was rotten from the start. The fire consuming them now is not emotional, it is structural. It is the unraveling of every system they built while stepping on your back. And no apology, no counterfeit tears, no excuse can undo it. The universe handed them space to repent, but instead of rising, they used that space to dig deeper. And now the ground itself is giving way beneath them. Now that pit they dug has become their dwelling, and the door is sealed shut. Number 10, they thought you were just another soul, but you came with a countdown they could not see. You were never sent to destroy them, but dishonoring you triggered a timer they cannot stop. This is what they missed. Chosen one, you are spiritually coded. You are not just emotion wrapped in skin. You are an assignment wrapped in a body, a soul marked with parameters written before you ever breathe. Boundaries not set by you, but etched into your very spiritual DNA. And when those boundaries are crossed, it doesn't just sting, it sets off systems. Consequences tied directly to your calling begin to activate. You're not just carrying pain. You're carrying a divine mechanism. And they thought they had time. They thought they could lie, manipulate, betray, and circle back whenever it suited them. But what they never discerned was the countdown quietly ticking in the background. It doesn't flash. It doesn't warn. But once it activates, judgment is no longer optional. It is scheduled. You weren't just the one they hurt. You were the clock they didn't realize they had set. Imagine this, a room filled with dynamite, and they light candles as if it were a party, laughing, blind to the fuse slowly burning beneath their own feet. That was your presence in their life. They treated you casually as though you weren't sacred. But heaven saw. Heaven knew. And heaven programmed your threshold, a spiritual tipping point where mercy ends and justice begins to move. This was never about your ego. You weren't seeking vengeance. You prayed for them. You hoped for healing. You even left the door cracked, believing redemption was possible. But destiny has rules, and your soul was never designed to absorb endless dishonor. Once that divine threshold is crossed, it stops being personal. It becomes procedural. They didn't just disrespect a person. They tripped an alarm in the spirit realm. And the timer they laughed at has now struck zero. The unraveling has already begun, and they don't even know which part of their life will collapse first. Influence fading. Relationships dissolving. Finances drying. Dreams stalling. Peace vanishing. And all the while they wander in confusion, wondering why nothing feels steady anymore. But, you felt the shift the moment it happened. Not when they ghosted you, not when they muttered false apologies, but when heaven itself stopped allowing them to touch you. You were a divine checkpoint, and they failed. And there is no switch to flip, no prayer to rewind, no charm to escape. Judgment is no longer pending, it is processing, and it will not stop until justice stands where they once stood smug. Number 11, they didn't bury you, they planted a legend, the rise they never saw coming. They hurled dirt on your name as if they were sealing your grave. Silent treatments, betrayals, whispers behind closed doors, they stacked it all like a tombstone. They wanted the world to believe you were finished, that you had nothing left, that their schemes had broken you for good. And when they saw you walk away weeping, bleeding in silence, they smiled and whispered, "We won." But what they didn't know is this: you weren't dying. You weren't dying, you were rooting. Because a chosen one does not die in pain. A chosen one is planted in purpose. That betrayal wasn't your ending. It was your activation. Every tear you shed in the dark watered the very calling they tried to erase. Every lie they spread became fertilizer. Every insult, every smear, every manipulative silence, all of it became spiritual soil. And while they were busy dancing on what they thought was your grave, the ground beneath them was trembling. Roots were digging deep. Destiny was taking shape. The silence they mocked, that was your transformation zone. A seed doesn't scream when it sprouts, it simply erupts. You were never gone. You were going deeper. They thought isolation would silence you, but it sharpened your ears to the voice of God. They thought rejection would define you, but it refined you. They didn't bury a failure, they planted a force. And now that force has broken through. The seed has sprouted. The silence has become strength. And the very ones who tried to bury you are now standing in awe and in fear of the forest you've become. Let's be clear, they never expected you to rise. They expected bitterness, breakdowns, disappearance. But instead, You gave them something far greater: resurrection. Not the kind that claps back with insults, but the kind that walks boldly into rooms they swore you would never enter. You now stand on stages they swore you would never touch. You smile in peace while they drown in chaos. Your rise is thunderous without a word spoken. Your glow is living proof they failed. And the irony, what they meant to destroy you with became the very momentum that lifted you higher. The fire they set against you has been transformed into your spotlight. They mocked you in ignorance, but heaven rewrote the script. They thought you were a tombstone, but God declared, no, this one is a temple. And every stone they threw is now part of the foundation of your empire. Let's go deeper. The fire you walk through was never meant for destruction. It was meant for crowning. This was never about revenge. This has always been about restoration. God did not just protect you, He preserved you. And now He is presenting you. You are stepping into alignment, into divine favor, into an elevation no hand can block. You didn't merely survive their attacks, you ascended through them. And make no mistake, your glow now is not just personal. It is prophetic. Your story is becoming someone else's survival manual. Your rise is the reminder that no betrayal, no scheme, no human hand can stop a calling rooted in the heavens. You were never a mistake they buried. You were a move of God they triggered. So let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them struggle to explain your comeback. Because the truth is, they never held the power. They were pawns in a process designed to reveal the unstoppable force you were becoming. You didn't lose, you launched. You didn't just bloom, you broke the surface like thunder. The same voices that once said, she's done, are now forced to watch the fruit of a life they tried to destroy. But your roots ran deeper than their rumors, and now your harvest is undeniable. You are not rising in spite of the fire, you are rising because of it. And if this word is shaking your soul, you already know why. Because you are that seed. They tried to bury you, erase you, rewrite your story, but you didn't die. You transformed, you rooted, you rose, and now you walk in a power they cannot touch. If this word was for you, drop a 777 in the comments right now. Hit subscribe so you never miss these truth-filled reminders. Like this video to keep the fire spreading. Share it with someone who feels buried so they know they're about to bloom. The fire didn't kill you, it crowned you. And this is only the beginning.